everyone. We're going to get started here. Excited for our first live Q&A for HIE Awareness Month 2024. Our theme this year is Transforming Hope, and we have so many exciting things that we're going to share this month, kicking off today to talk about a new project that we've been working on behind the scenes with Dr. Eric Peeples. Dr. Peeples, welcome to this event, and I'm really excited to share about this idea that you came up with and reached out about, and that we've kind of been workshopping on the side, waiting to launch into our community. And just a little preface for everyone, as you know, education when you're new to HIE, just learning about the terms can be very overwhelming. There's so much to learn. It's like learning a whole new language, a whole new culture. For so many people, it's the first time that they've been in a complex medical situation. And so, it's really can be very difficult, as we know. And the past several years, our organization obviously has been trying to develop materials that help families understand. And we partner with neonatologists like Dr. Peeples on, making sure that these are correct, accurate, and accessible for families. So Deanna Bryan, who's our program manager, has been working relentlessly since she started with us, to make them as accessible and translated into as many languages as possible, so that way families can get this information in their first language, and making sure that accessibility is at the forefront of everything we do. And education is such a big process. And we talk about health literacy a lot. And that, again, it takes intention, and it takes time to really get the hang of, the terminology. It's like learning a different world. So really excited to talk today about this program and project that we're going to be talking through. And so, Dr. Peeples, welcome. And if you could, give an introduction about, a little bit of your background as a neonatologist, and then your special interest in HIE, because you have a very robust research lab that you have going on, and want to make sure that, everyone gets, we always love to hear the stories behind the research that goes on, because, as we've talked before and our families know, we feel so kind of out of, fish out of water in the NICU often with our HIE stories and HIE children. The unexpected journey of most of us having full-term babies or near-term babies and going through this wild neurological, diagnosis. So it's something that, is not, obviously we talk about a lot, but in the context of the NICU, it's not as talked about. So would love to hear your introduction.
Absolutely. Well, first off, thanks so much for having me. So from my journey, I am initially from Phoenix, Arizona, but I ended up here in Omaha, where I am now, initially for college, and stayed here for medical school at Creighton University, just down the street from the hospital that I work at currently. I did go back home for residency, did pediatrics at Phoenix Children's, and then matched for neonatology fellowship in Seattle at Seattle Children's and University of Washington. And that's really where my HIE path began. So I worked throughout fellowship and my research under Dr. Sunny Jewell, who was one of the main investigators for the US-based erythropoietin neonatal studies. So not just the kind of HEAL study, which I know many of you all are very familiar with, but she also is the primary investigator for the preterm erythropoietin or peanut studies. And so she really kind of opened my eyes to neonatal brain injury and really the kind of the difficulties that we face clinically with that, and how her and her lab were really seeking to overcome some of the clinical limitations that we have, and really kind of find new therapies and new ways to look at this problem. And so I took that and the education that she had provided in the lab there, and took that to my lab that I have now built here since arriving in Nebraska about 7 years ago now. and as Betsy mentioned, set up both a bench research lab looking at neuroprotection and therapeutics for HIE. But we also have quite a bit of clinical work that we do around that as well. So again, really excited to be here.
Thank you so much. And it's just always so fun to learn about where everyone has come from and their interest in HIE. So, let's talk about communicating with families first. And, we know on the family side that there's so much variability with how families get a diagnosis or talked about. There's so many, complexities with HIE, and especially in the early part, it feels like a fire hose. And, trying again to translate these really complex topics and understanding in a diagnosis that is so wide in potential outcomes and impacts. What is your approach of, how you communicate with families, and what challenges do you feel like you face or clinicians face when communicating?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with kind of the challenges, and I think one of the biggest ones is time and presence. And so I think we all know that kind of as families, people are balancing having a sick child in the NICU and trying to be as present as possible for that child with all of the other things in life that continue to happen while that's going on. And so we know that families are not always available at bedside. We do always give phone updates to those families, but I can't tell you how many times I call for a phone update and I can hear all of the other things that are going on in the background that person on the phone is trying to deal with at the time where we're trying to have sometimes fairly serious conversations. And obviously, as clinicians, we aren't always able to be present as well. And so trying to get those times to match up to where we can have a nice, quiet conversation in person, face to face, without a lot of distractions is incredibly difficult. And even when we can be face to face, we still have cell phones and computers and things that are pulling our attention at those times. And so I think that's really one of the biggest is just being able to match up those times, and the times don't always match up with when that question comes up in your head, and so that can be very difficult for both us and for absolutely for families most first and foremost. From my approach standpoint, one of the things that I always seek to do, and we can always do better, is translating kind of the medical jargon that you were talking about into English for our families, and trying to meet families where they're at from that standpoint. And I think that it's something that has been much more commonly thought of and addressed in medical training recently, where we are all now trained to kind of try and give that translation, not to use as much medical speak and medical jargon, but it's something that we always have to be consciously aware of. And like I said, we can all certainly do better at.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. And, we hear from families too that, and we've heard a lot of variability because of course, we're humans. And so you have your approach, and then, we have how we would take things or process through, and it's a lot to talk through. But one of the things that we obviously advocate around here is making sure that families do understand like that specific diagnosis, that it's named, that we have an understanding. And that's been, kind of one of the drums that we beat on regularly, and making sure that, because it is helpful for families to understand this diagnosis, and connect to support, and long-term, understanding, because it's not necessarily just a short-term issue. So what do you see as some of the expressed or unmet needs of families facing HIE that you have worked with in your, NICU and beyond?
Sure. So I think one of the ones that comes up with almost every family is the availability of clear and easily accessible information, and specifically information without bias. I think we talk a lot about doing basic internet searches, right? For most of our life, that is how we find information, is we do a basic internet search with one of the various internet search engines. And what I think we all are aware of to different degrees is that those search engines are companies, right? And they're often financially motivated to preferentially direct families to websites of organizations that are paying them, which sometimes is not, and often is not, a scientific or medical organization. And so a lot of times you really have to sift through a lot of potentially misleading information in those search engines to be able to get to the core important information in an accessible way. So a lot of times those kind of law firms or whatever websites are interspersed with very heavy medical research documents that are not necessarily easily digestible, especially for a family who's just getting this news and trying to get the basics of what HIE means, and they're not at the point where they can be reading kind of high level scientific publications on it, because they just want to know kind of what does it mean and what does it mean for my baby. Medical teams are a great source of communication and information, but like we just talked about, they aren't always immediately available for every question that comes up. And a lot of families, I feel like, aren't comfortable asking all of their questions to the medical team, whether it's because they're uncomfortable with the topic itself, or they don't want to be perceived as being needy or unintelligent for not knowing something. And obviously, we don't feel that on our side, but I know that it is something that families have voiced to us, that no, I don't want to ask that question because I don't want you to think that I'm dumb. And I think that there's no dumb questions is not enough for some families, and so I think they do seek potentially non-human based interaction for those kinds of questions, so that they can try and get those answered. And again, then they face those other issues that can sometimes come up with the search engines.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that has been really difficult for us as an organization, is having, especially a nonprofit, like, we pinch every penny. And trying to always work like the free search engine optimization strategies, to try to keep our content up, but we will never outspend some of the people that are out there spending money to have theirs reach the first page. Even sometimes it's really tricky, so it's just always like a game with the algorithms. Which can be really tricky. All right, so let's talk and shift to the topic that we have at hand today, which is, technology and how it has advanced, certain aspects of creating more accessible, resources and things for families. And, some of the questions you've asked, when looking how to best communicate with and educate families. Oops, did I go away?
I see
What
that you may
happened?
be frozen, but I do still hear you. So that's the more important part, I think.
The irony of it all.
Right. So as long as everyone can still hear me on my side, I think at this point the technology is at our fingertips. I mentioned kind of smartphones and computers and everything, kind of that we can easily access all kinds of information, and I think it has helped a lot in building health literacy for everyone. I think we sometimes lose a little bit like I talked about, the face-to-face interaction, some of that human interaction, which sometimes can bring extra value above and beyond what we can get through our smartphones. But I think when we're kind of thinking about that communication and how we can optimize that, think one of the biggest things that is unanswered from my standpoint, as far as questions that I'm looking into and trying to figure out how we can overcome, is how can you get that kind of direct interaction, or if you can't get that direct interaction, how can you approximate that using our technology? And so one of our kind of great resources locally here is our medical librarians, who are fantastic at coming up with really great kind of communication, either tip sheets or kind of written or video communication for families to try and educate them on a specific diagnosis. And we've certainly utilized their services when we've talked about trying to optimize our communication with families with HIE. And they have brought us some really great resources. But I think one of the difficulties, again, that we have is that those aren't interactive, and we can't necessarily have a FaceTime or a Skype with a medical librarian every time that we have a diagnosis of HIE, which certainly makes it difficult. And so how can we get that real-time feedback with that expert voice when we can't always have somebody immediately available for that?
Makes sense for sure. So let's shift, and my camera is still, I've tried to like turn it on and off several times. So we're just gonna have, I can speak and you can hear me. So that's great. So we'll keep going with that way. But let's get into the idea that you came up with, to use AI and technology to bridge some of the gaps that exist.
Yeah. So as I think most people at this point are becoming more and more aware of, lots of people are using artificial intelligence or AI chatbots. ChatGPT, I think, is probably one of the more famous ones at this point, but there are lots of others, Copilot, Gemini. Pretty much every big tech company is coming up with their own at this point. And people are using them to seek out information, sometimes just playing with them initially to see what they can do. But I think ultimately looking to them as sources of information. One of their best features, the technology is called a large language model, and kind of one of their key features is their ability to manipulate language. And so they are really powerful at translating and rewording information for clarity, language spoken, and scientific comfort level. For example, you could ask a chatbot to take a description of HIE that you give them, for example, and reword it so it would be understandable for your 6-year-old child. And it will give you a really nice, clear, child-friendly version. And so things like that, they're really powerful for, and they can be really helpful for. On the other hand, however, chatbots generally pull information from every publicly available source of information. And so it can bias the information that comes back in a similar way to the search engines, right? And so much of the medical literature is behind a paywall and is not generally publicly available. And so a lot of the really key information, the really important information, actually is not getting pulled into those chatbots. And most of the potentially misleading or false information does get pulled in. And so that balance really can get thrown off in these traditional large language models when we're trying to use them for scientific or medical information. And so our project seeks to use the power of these tools, these large language models, but with a curated and limited source of information that the tool pulls from to try and minimize the chances of false or misleading information being pulled into that chat response.
That's so, I was very excited, obviously, when you emailed with the idea. And it's really, something that we as a community talk about a lot and struggle with, because there is so much misinformation. This is the misinformation era, especially, online. And we want families to make sure that they are getting, that accurate information. We work really hard to do so when we build our educational materials, because we also see the negative impacts when people don't. And we see, just a lot of predatory companies and predatory, bad actors targeting our community, making really grand promises on that are just, or they're just inaccurate claims or fear tactics. And typically these things come with a very large price tag. And then a lot of families don't necessarily consider, when they think about safety, they think about like physical health, which is obviously really important. And that a lot of things that are untested, don't necessarily have why we have, regulatory agencies like the FDA and rigor in research is to look at safety and things like that. But we also need to talk about financial safety. And so, I think from our perspective as a support and advocacy organization, we want to make sure that families, especially that first, year or two, really can rely on us and on a source out there for vetted information that is, solid, and help them build those skills, because the first things that normally come up when you search are complex medical journals, and you'll see a headline and you think it means one thing, and then you read in and the context might not be at all what you would assume from the headline of the research article. So I'm really, really excited about this possibility to, use these tools for our community to help. So let's talk a little bit about the project as we, look at building it as a resource. Harnessing AI for HIE families. So what are the details of this? What is the scope of, where we're going to hope to take this project?
Absolutely. So our hope is to essentially modify the existing technologies to provide a single trustworthy source of information that is specifically designed for families of children affected by HIE. And so the tool that we're building will be based on the same large language models that power the existing tools like ChatGPT. But as I mentioned, we'll instead pull only from the medical literature, scientific organizations, and resources from trusted support and advocacy groups like Hope for HIE. And so we are hoping to have a freely available application that can be accessed from multiple different platforms. So from your cell phone, from your computer, and can provide real-time responses to questions that you have around HIE. And again, will not replace information from the medical team and those kinds of sources of information, but for those questions that families currently are going to a Google or a general general search engine to look for that information, this can be a source that can funnel these questions in. And if it doesn't have the right answer for the question, it will also be able to refer to places such as the Hope for HIE website, other kind of trusted resources where the families can then go and kind of on that second click go and look for that additional information. So again, kind of a one-stop shop for where can I find information about HIE.
Awesome. And so this is a team effort. So who is working on this project with you?
Absolutely. So I am a little bit biased, but I think we have a pretty amazing team put together. And so I think first and foremost, you, Betsy, and the fantastic Hope for HIE team have been integral in getting this project moving forward, and will be amazing partners down the road for this. We also, in addition to the members of my lab, have included a really brilliant group of researchers just down the road here at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, led by Chunhua Tsai, who are experts in large language models, and will be kind of designing the large language model and the interface that families will see when they're looking at this application.
Awesome. So the next is, how should families sign up to be a part of the beta test and give their input? I guess we can both kind of answer this one, but we're excited to have information on our website that everyone can go to right now. It's live, and we'll also share the links on social media today, and a blog post and the usual communication channels that we send stuff out to. But you can go right now to hopeforhie.org/chathie, which is our working name for this project. And there's some background about it. There's the link for the survey to sign up. And you can learn a little bit more about the research team and get going with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, so you heard it here first. This is the official rollout, and so the beta version of this application already exists. And so what this next step is to get input on how it should be revised, how it should be modified moving forward, as well as to get really kind of interested and kind of knowledgeable beta testers, right? There's no better beta tester in the world for an application about HIE than the families that have gone through this and the families that know what their experience was, what they were missing out on, what they had trouble finding when they went through this. And so we really want to hear those voices. And so that's the very first thing before we talk about making this available to the public in any form, is we want to make sure that it is answering the right questions for the right people. And so we want to hear those voices. So if you are interested in providing that voice and telling us a little bit more about kind of what your path was, and providing some feedback on how we can help families like you in the future. Again, Betsy and the group will have the link out all kinds of places. And so click on that. It's a very short survey that just gives us some contact information so that we can then reach out to you to schedule a series of interviews in order to get that information. So depending on response, we do have some somewhat limited bandwidth for the interviews themselves. So if we get a really robust response, we might not be able to invite everyone for an interview. But we do hope that everyone who responds will at least be able to be involved in the beta testing of the application moving forward. And so we'll kind of reach out to anybody who fills out that survey and let you know what the next steps are.
Awesome. And we've shared the chat, the link in the chat. So for anyone that's watching right now or afterwards, it will be attached to this video, in addition to obviously going out as separate posts. So one of the questions, I guess we could talk about this earlier, but a lot of people have voiced concerns, out in the world about AI and, like that robots are going to take over everything and, all the things. And that, anyone that's kind of tooled around with ChatGPT and other resources, sometimes it doesn't get things right. So how are you addressing kind of the known issues in the planning of this project?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this is a big part of this initial family interview phase of we want to hear those concerns and ensure that we are addressing those appropriately. Like you said, we know the general concerns that have been raised in the overall public. And I think we talked about kind of the aspect of misinformation and some of those aspects that we're trying to fix on the back end of this particular application. But a big part of that beta testing is going to be not necessarily is the information correct, because again, it should be pulling from trusted sources that should kind of optimize the validity of the response. But more so, is this response something that is helpful for you? And so you can ask a question and it could give a factually accurate response, but it might not be terribly helpful, and it might not be exactly what you were trying to ask. And so those kinds of things are things that will be difficult to address for certain, but are things that we want to hear, and we want to be able to address in advance so that we're not kind of having this out in the community, potentially, again, providing any kind of misleading or inaccurate information.
Really helpful. Thank you so much for that really thorough explanation too of all the thought that's going into this. So our final question, and we ask this of all of our wonderful people that join us for these Q&As, what are your favorite resources to tap into for educating families and communicating with them?
Absolutely. So I mentioned them earlier, but the medical librarians, for anybody who lives in a city with a kind of university that's attached to a hospital, there's almost always a medical librarian there. And one of the, I think, relatively untapped resources for family education. They are incredibly knowledgeable, not only a lot of times about these disease processes themselves, because of their help in helping researchers and physicians and clinicians to learn themselves about the questions, but also they're very educated in how to sift through the information that exists out there. And so they can be incredibly helpful for not only us as clinicians, but also for families and for advocating for families. And so if you're struggling to find an answer on a question, and you are lucky enough to kind of live close by or have contact with a university hospital, look and see if you can find their medical librarians and shoot a text or an email to them. And a lot of times you're going to be able to get an answer through them that would take a ton of time of you searching on your own. So they're a huge one that I can't talk enough about. The other ones that I think I end up referring a lot of families to locally, the Early Development Network, the Nebraska EDN, here has a great website with a lot of the local resources. And I think most state early development networks do have a similar type of resource. But then for HIE, I think we all know the first and foremost resource, and I refer countless numbers of families to the Hope for HIE website, and have heard nothing but good things back from them.
And you didn't have to say that, but thank you. All right. Yeah, my camera is still, I don't know, I keep turning it on and off and it's still the screen. So I probably have to reinstall something in my computer. Never a dull day with technologies. Again, irony with the topic today, but really, really excited and so thankful for all the work that you do that is focused on HIE. Our president of our board always talks about this when he has a chance to, so I'll say this for him as well, of how truly, when you're in this, living it and raising a baby and kid, it just doesn't sometimes feel like it's at the forefront of people's minds. And so for you to choose this as a focus area, we are very grateful for, because the work that you and others do is driving forward things that have not been possible for this community before. So thank you for your incredible work and attention and support and care for this community. Really excited for this project. So everyone that is listening, hopefully you're heading to the website. Let's see here. We can do a little screen share too. Deanna's on the back end. Let me see. Can I share my screen? Let's see. Present. Share screen. All right, let's see if it wants to, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Oh, yay. Okay. So yeah, if you go to hopeforhie.org/chathie, ignore this last part, you're going to find this web. Have a little overview about this. There is some compensation for those participants that get selected, which is really nice and we're grateful for. And you can sign up by clicking on this button. It's going to take you out to this recruitment form that we talked about. Nice and short and simple. And then back on this page, you're going to see, again, the research team. And if there's any questions, you can reach out with the contact us button, and then we will facilitate those as a part of this project. So thank you again, Dr. Peeples, for your work, all the things that you have going on, and for this project and collaboration. Community, we're really excited for this one, so make sure that you sign up, and we will talk to everyone soon.
Thank you again so much for having me.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.